All right, well, everyone's just gone quiet at the same time, so I'm going to take that opportunity to start. How's everyone feeling this morning? Woo! Thank you so much for coming in so early. I know that it can be a bit difficult after the first night of a conference, so I appreciate that you've come out to come listen to this amazing panel of people. So we are here to talk about great workplaces by design. Company culture is something that's crucially important, and it's only becoming more important as we go forward and realize, just how important people are to the process of making games. Who'd have thought? So weird, right? And this is a panel of incredible experts on this topic, because culture doesn't happen in a vacuum. Culture is something that has to be designed and curated over time. And if you don't design and curate your culture will spring up in the void, and it will probably be a reflection of all the worst parts of your company. So on our incredible panel, we have Emre, Calliope, Jen, Zoe, and Steph. Sorry, I can't see from here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves because obviously they're going to do it far better than I'm going to do. My name is Esler. I work for the Game Developers Association of Australia. We're the industry body, much like the NZGDA, that oversees the industry throughout Australia. We advocate on behalf of and for the industry to government, overseas, etc. And before that, I was a producer and writer at Obsidian and Beamdog and producer at Surprise Attack. I've worked in a lot of different teams as well. Some of them good, some of them not so good. But today's about positivity. So, Emre, speaking of positivity, can you introduce yourself, please?
Well, that's a change in the memo. Hi, I'm Emre. I'm the CEO/director of Opaque Space, or basically I do the day-to-day management of the company. We specialize in VR, MR, and AR games and content development. So we collaborate with some aerospace partners. Some I can't talk about, and some include people like NASA and ESA. And we've been working in the field now for about 4 or 5 years. And yeah, I'm going to keep it positive, which is not my forte. So bear with me today.
Thank you. Not to completely refute what Liam just said, but I'm a student, I'm not an expert.
Don't undersell.
I'm in my second year of game art at Media Design School, and I'm currently in the process of publishing a commercial game with Group Pug. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about. That's why I'm here. And I guess my professional background was in PR before I decided to come into games.
I'm Jen MacLean. I'm the Executive Director of the IGDA and IGDA Foundation. I am a 25-year industry veteran, which means I am old and cynical and grizzled and I'm going to try to be positive. I started at a company called Microprose, best known for Civilization, in the playtest department. So I have seen pretty much every good, bad, and ugly thing you can see in terms of how people are treated and teams are built, including being told that my job could be done by a trained monkey. That was fun. But also having people like Sid Meier say, hey, this team plays more games than anyone else in the company, so we're going to get our games in front of them as quickly as possible. So I'm really looking forward to sharing what I've learned from those experiences and hopefully being more positive than might naturally be my inclination.
Hi, I'm Zoe Hobson. I'm the Managing Director of Runaway Play. We make mobile games inspired by nature, so all of our games are free to play. We're based in Dunedin, and we have 26 amazing people as part of our company. I've been in the games industry for the last 2 years, and prior to that, my background is in film and television.
I'm Steph Paul, and I work at Rocketworks in Dunedin. We formed about 2 years ago, and we've gone from 0 staff to about 42 in quite a short space of time. Before I started at Rocketworks, I was working in various different industries like local government, tourism, and the university as well. So lots of admin before I started, and also lots of different industries. So learning about how different organisations work and what works, what doesn't. And it's been quite a learning curve coming into the games industry. So hopefully I can share some insights from that.
So as you can see, like this is an incredibly diverse panel of people with very, very different backgrounds who have all come through very, very different workplaces. So I'm very, very curious personally to hear what stories you have and what sort of insights you can share with our audience today. So as I mentioned at the beginning, my personal opinion is that culture is probably one of the most important things in any company, and that culture is a kind of like a bonsai. It must be pruned, it must be cared for. If you don't do that, it's going to grow out of control, and it's probably going to grow in ways that you don't expect and don't want. So how do we set cultural expectations at a company? Like when somebody comes on board or when we're starting up, what kind of things can we do to start that process of defining our culture, and how then can we grow that forward as each new employee comes on board?
Is how we're doing the answering.
Whoever wants to answer first, just jump in. I mean, I can pull up on specific people if you'd prefer.
I'd actually like to hear from the bigger studios first, because your HR process is for defining culture.
I can jump in first. So I guess it actually starts probably before the person's even on the team. So when we get someone in for an interview, it's not so much an interview. We don't do code tests or anything like that. It's more about seeing how they fit with the team. So we get them in, we have lunch with them, and we talk, and Dean makes them play games, and we just sort of get to know them and see how they might feel about the way we do things. We're a little bit perhaps different to some other studios. We have a flat structure, which means there's no like middle management or anything like that, which doesn't mean no rules, but it does mean that everybody has to take on some personal responsibility for speaking up when they need to, or if they don't like something, they need to do something about it, have solutions, that kind of thing. So it's not always something that suits everybody. So having really in-depth discussions with them and expressing that to them in the beginning before they even join the team is really important. And then once they're actually on the team, we try and integrate them as quickly as possible, because we have a lot of people from overseas or even just throughout New Zealand that have moved there. So they don't have a lot of contacts in Dunedin. And it's trying to create a community kind of feel when they first start.
I think it even starts before that with writing the job description. So I was working with a major studio in Seattle, looking at their different job descriptions, and in one of them they had two things that to me were really troublesome. They said, first of all, must eat, sleep, breathe games. And when you think about the implicit message that is sending, it is that there is nothing else important in your life. Your job must be everything you are focused on for literally every hour, because you're sleeping games too, right? So when you think about it, is that a place you want to work, where they are saying nothing is as important as what you do here? The other thing that they said was, we'll do whatever it takes to get the job done. And so when you, exactly, right? When you think about that, does that mean that if someone isn't performing, it's okay to harass them to get them out of the company? Does that mean it's okay to expect your team to work 20-hour weeks? Does that mean it's okay to steal someone else's code? You know, all of these things that when you say, we'll do whatever it takes to get the job done, that might sound really romantic in terms of things like romanticizing crunch, or it might sound like really gung-ho. But what you're actually saying is that integrity isn't important, honesty isn't important, and how you treat your colleagues isn't important. So, you know, even starting at your job description, I think sends a real message about the culture you want to build and the behaviors that you value in your company.
I mean, to add to that, we specifically in our job description removed minimum years experience. Yes. Because it's not relevant. There's a lot of people that have worked in games that they can, if they want, they can stack those years up, and they can. I've heard of people that have worked for themselves and describe it as being a 7-year senior programmer, or people that have worked, 1 or 2 years on very large titles, but don't have the confidence to put their applications across. And what ends up happening is, especially with minorities, they tend to try and tick every single box before they go through. So removing those barriers from the employer side is actually quite important. Like, we don't need If we interview someone, we trial them, we have a probationary period or whatever that may be, we don't need to have minimum years experience. We need attitude first, because we can teach people things. We can't teach them to be decent at our workplace. That's very difficult. The other big thing was we try in the interview process to ask people questions about what their hobbies outside of gaming is. And some people have said, I don't really play games. And like, that's okay. What do you do? Tell me more about your hobby. Because games is us pouring into a pot a range of experiences and anecdotes and personal history or interests and things like that. And the best way to keep making clones of games is to have everyone who just keeps playing the same games pouring to that pot. So, and we've had great things like our senior programmer, who's ex-EA, has described, like in one of the interviews, we also get the interviewees to interview the team. So they come in and they talk to the team, or they ask them questions, or they may have a chat with some of the team members. And like, that's just to make sure I'm not lying to them in the cube about how, like, we're a great culture, and then everyone else is like, right. But one of them said, and this was not because I was holding a gun towards that employee, but it was more along the lines that he just said that was the best workplace he's had the chance to work at to date. And he was talking to someone who was also ex-AAA, and they kind of talked a little bit, I think, about it over DMs or something. And he was telling me that, she had a lot of concerns coming in, and she felt much better hearing that kind of stuff, flexible work hours and things like that. So that was good. Removing the obstacles at the hiring stage or pre-hiring stage when you do the call out, and making the effort to put the labor in to engaging with the groups that can help, like megaphone your message. So talk to nodes of communication, minorities, or engage in women's groups and say, can you please review this call out, tell us if there's any problems, and then if it's great, then spread it across your network as well, because we want to cast a wide net basically.
Cool. I want to throw a question specifically to Calliope, because you're on the other side of this as someone prospectively looking at getting a job.
Exactly.
What kind of things are important to you when looking at a job description or talking to or interviewing a company from a cultural perspective?
So it's actually very heartening to hear you guys all say these things. It's really wonderful. So personally, for me, I think that the biggest thing is respect within the company, so everyone has a really high degree of respect for each other, because I can work with lots of different types of people, right? I'm an artist, and so that paints a picture about me instantly, and I can communicate with extroverts and introverts, and it doesn't really matter to me sort of what kind of background you're from or how you prefer to communicate. The important thing, and the thing that in my past experience seems to make a team work and gel the best, is respect, and that everyone feels heard, that no one's interrupted, that everyone has positive things to say about their leaders and also the people who are junior to them, and that the juniors also feel like they are looked after and nurtured, and not left alone to their own devices, because that's really scary.
So I think a key part of that is obviously that feeling of psychological safety, right? Where people do feel like they can express different opinions and throw ideas out that are maybe a little bit crazy or off the wall.
Yeah. So I guess it's taking away the fear of failure so much, because I think that as a junior in particular, when you're scared of saying the wrong thing or saying something stupid, you're not being your best creative self. You're not... you're sort of not allowed to throw out those wacky ideas that might actually be really important to the company, or they could end up being a really pivotal moment for everyone. But if you're scared and you don't feel safe and you don't feel like the company's got your back and will look after you and want you to grow and succeed, I think that in the end the company's doing themselves a disservice, because they don't get the best out of their juniors or their employees in general.
And can I just jump in on that as well and say that from that's kind of a lesson that I've definitely kind of learned over the last couple of years in terms of just as a manager, like where my time should be. And one of the biggest, and I think I said this in a panel yesterday, one of the biggest things that I've been doing as a manager is trying to make sure that the vast majority of my time goes to my people. And so people trump everything else that's on my to-do list. And so and that's had to be a real conscious shift for me because I have a big workload. And what I've done is made sure that during kind of normal working hours, if something comes up that relates to a person, like that just has to kick everything else off my schedule. And I've definitely seen the effects of that and really noticed that when people know that you're available to them as a manager, they will talk to you more. And I think that that's just like one of the single most important things that you can do to reinforce your company culture. Because if you say, like, we listen to you, we respect you, but then you don't actually have the time to listen to people and engage with them, then it's not happening. I also think one of the really important things is, like at Runaway, we make a real effort to try to get everyone's feedback on things. And we have like all hands meetings once a week where we go through. We're super transparent with like all of our financial stuff and our plans for the company and our plans for the projects. And we always sort of say, does anyone have feedback? Like, do you have suggestions? And often people don't in that meeting. And it's like, okay, well, message them to me, like come chat to me afterwards. And then when people make suggestions, one of the things that I'm really big on is like I write it down and I put it in my calendar and I make sure I follow up on it, because the kind of response you get from your staff when they say something to you and then like a day or two later you actually turn around and deliver on what they have asked about and are like, hey, you said that you were confused about this thing, so I made this diagram to like explain it to you. Does that help? Or you meet with them again the next week if you know that they've got some stuff going on. You're like, hey, I know that last week you had some family stuff happening. How's it going? Like, they appreciate it so much. And I just think that, people come first. We can't do anything we do without people, so your time has to go to your people.
There's a really interesting technique for that I've used. So every month I would take the people who had a birthday in that month out to lunch. And when you're a small team of like 30 or 40, it might be a lunch of 3 or 4 people. When you're a larger team like 200, you end up with 20 people. And the nice thing about that is that you end up with people in every discipline at every level of the company. And so there was one time where I was at a company with 300 people. And this was a terrible idea. We had a floor that was just art, and a floor that was just design, and a floor that was just engineering. So at this lunch, the artist said, it really makes me mad that we're the only ones working late, and we're the only ones dedicated. And the designers were like, wait a minute, we're the only ones working late. And the engineers were like, no, we work the latest. Because we have that kind of environment where you have really a random group of people. It was a great opportunity to break down those walls and to really not only hear what your team is saying, but also help other people in the team hear what they're saying.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that having team members really understand each other is really important too. So something that we've been doing at Runaway, which I kind of got inspired by a talk at GDC earlier this year, is we're doing a segment called Day in the Life during our all hands meetings. So now every week, we have it scheduled so that one team member, and we've got both personal day in the life and professional day in the life. And day in the life is basically 5 slides where, if it's a personal one, you talk for like less than 3 minutes, 5 slides about your life outside of work. And it can be anything. It can be stuff that inspired you as a kid. It can be your favorite books. It can be your family, where you're from, whatever you're comfortable sharing. Because we're not that big a team, but I'm still like every week learning new stuff about people, which is really, really cool. And it forms new connections. And the team loves it. Like, everyone's really into it. So it's like personal day in the life and then professional day in the life, which is similar, but talking as a like in-depth dive into what you actually do in your job. And it just really helps people to understand better the pressures or the focus of other people's roles. And that's something that I think is really important.
Creating empathy between different disciplines and different ways of working is so important. And obviously, I've had similar experiences where we've been siloed in different teams or on different projects, and you often don't realize that a lot of your problems are shared. And as soon as you talk to other people, they have different solutions. You can commiserate, you can talk about these things. And so what can we do as both employees and as employers to promote empathy amongst our teams?
Sit with your staff. Like, the biggest issue that I think Opaque has faced in the past was enforcing rigid hierarchies. Sitting with your staff means that you're on the ground level, that you're embedded with people, that you're making yourself available. The biggest managerial faults that we've had, or breakdowns or waste of resources, have been when managers are unavailable, or they're out of the room, or they're having closed door meetings and making decisions without the game studio is not a democracy, but it's a council of voices, so that the business owners or the owners of the vision or the projects are able to make informed decisions, right? So that means that I think empathy-wise is sitting with the staff and being on the ground floor with them and engaging with them and taking the time to get their opinions is very important. But I don't know, you guys are bigger teams, so.
I think that's totally true for us, and I really notice the effects of if, you go through something really busy period or something like that, and you're not checking in with the different teams, because we have quite a bunch of different projects. People will just fill that void with what they think is happening, and like those closed door meetings, I really noticed just before we started the company. I went overseas and worked for a while on a different project in London, and when people are having these meetings that they go off into this room and you don't know what happens, and even if it's completely legitimate, when it happens a lot, you start filling that void with whatever you think is going on, and it just creates this whole beast that is out of control and often really incorrect. So you really need to check in with people one-to-one and actually keep them in the loop about things, and I find that when you do that, it reduces the amount of void filling kind of things that go on, and you really notice the differences when you check in with people and keep them updated and don't have all these presumed secrets going on.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think equally to the sort of professional side of check in with people is that personal side as well, of just notice if somebody has a sick cat, or if somebody has taken a day off because they've got something going on with their kid or their mum or their whatever, notice and then ask them about it. And I think that it sounds so simple, but I think as a manager it's really easy to not do, because you just are so sort of focused on the big picture of what you're trying to do as a studio. But I think it's just hugely important.
So I think that these issues can become more complicated over time as our teams grow and change. And many of you have experienced fairly rapid change in various teams that you've worked on. How do you manage culture when you've got a rapid amount of growth and sometimes you don't always know in which way your culture is going to go?
I mean, I think the single most important thing is just hiring and that cultural fit on hire.
When you say cultural fit, can you sort of expand that out? Because obviously that can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah, it can. I mean, really for us, it just comes down to, are they a nice person? Are they a cool person? Are they friendly? Are they going to fit in with the team in terms of hang out and be social and just, go for coffee? And it doesn't mean that they have to be an extrovert. Just, we've got definitely not some extroverts on our team, but it's just, are we going to be able to sort of relate to these people? And I think that ability to relate to each other is just the biggest, most important thing for us. So I think it really comes from hiring. We've definitely made a couple of hires in the time that I've been at the company that have turned out to not be the best fit, and both the person and us, we all kind of felt it. And, luckily for us, they decided to move on anyway, because they could feel that it wasn't the best fit. But I think that those instances happened when we were hiring roles in a hurry, when it felt like we need to fill this gap immediately, it's really important, and then we made the wrong hire. So that's definitely a lesson I've learnt, is that that's not something that we do now.
There's nothing that
There's
urgent.
nothing that urgent, because bringing in the wrong person is far worse than not filling the role at all.
I think you have to have a zero tolerance for assholes.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, often you hear, well, this person is a jerk, but they're really good at being, a graphics engineer. This person is a jerk, but they're an amazing such and such. And the thing is, when you accept bad behavior from someone because they show technical competence or skill-based competence, the message you are sending is it's okay to be an asshole. Yeah. And that's not an acceptable message.
No, and even we've worked with not going to get too specific, but we have worked with a consultant who was very challenging. And even though they weren't part of our in-house team, the effect that working with somebody like that had on me personally, because I was managing them directly, and on the people around me by the fact that they heard me swearing and screaming at my computer when I was Skype chatting him, like it has an effect. Like anyone that you work with that is, not a fit has a big effect.
I think that from the employer's perspective, or not just employer, sorry, the owner of a business's perspective, if your employees know that you're willing to take a financial hit to pursue culture, then it sends a message to them that culture is the first defining factor of how that business functions. Like anecdotally, we did have a situation where one of our partners for an exhibition wanted to have booth models, and we said no. Not only no, like we'll rip up the contract and just say, no, we're not doing it anymore, see you later. And that was a really substantial contract for us as well. But once we sent that email out, everyone around the studio knew that there is very, very specific lines that if we're willing to rip up a contract over something that we believe in specifically, then internally, we have very, very set and rigid rules, and we're not going to, and these rules are very simple. It's just, don't be an asshole, don't be racist, don't be sexist. And yeah, if you can't follow those things, then maybe Opaque is not the right place for you. We've had issues with it in the past, but since we've changed the way that we hire people to include a very lengthy discussion and a more kind of social engagement with people, we haven't had any HR issues so far. I mean, looking back on the type of an organization that we were when we were very kind of, does it tick the boxes of skill and experience? Yes, it does. Let's hire that person. Oh no, we've got an HR incident. Now 4 or 5 people are upset, and there's a big mess. To now is just night and day at this stage, basically.
Steph, I know that Rocketworks has hired very quickly over the last little while. How have you handled this, and have you experienced any issues with that process, particularly in terms of like toxicity and stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the hiring process, we went from 0 up to 42, and there was a period where we were employing a new person every week, sometimes 2 people. And at that point, we realised that it's a little bit difficult to actually onboard people and do them a good service of employing them and making them feel welcome and looking after them when you're doing that so quickly. So we did slow down with that, and I noticed anyway, at about perhaps 15 to 20 staff, it starts kind of becoming its own organism. Like you can't really stop people from making games at that point. It just kind of goes a little bit, out of control in some ways. And it changes how you need to approach things once you have a large number of people, and keeping people in the loop about things is a challenge. So we have meetings every week. We have, on a Friday, we have drinks and nibbles, which we call dribbles, where we have a retro, and we'll talk about what people liked, what people didn't like, what they're confused about, and really encouraging people to bring forth something that they're not happy with. You have to write it on a whiteboard, so there is a barrier there. We've started putting the retro thing up on the whiteboard earlier so people can come in during the day. They don't have to have people watching them while they write on the whiteboard. And then the alternating weeks, we have show and tell so people can show their work, and it brings the teams together a lot more, I think. Yeah.
Can I just say one tiny little thing on that as well? Yeah, I really agree that it's really important as a studio that you don't just have like this vision of we are this kind of a studio, but that you actually act on those things and make sure and constantly check yourself to make sure that you are actually acting on the things that you say are important. So something that we do is we have, we have an all hands meeting on a Wednesday with the whole team. Everything's transparent, financials, everything is completely open to the company so that our whole company understands like if we are able to spend money on this thing or if we're not, like why. We have team lunches, we do game design club, we do, like a whole series of things which are based around what our values are. And sometimes even recently somebody actually said to me, I really miss how we used to do this thing. And I was like, oh yeah, that was really important. That like relates directly to the kind of company we want to be. And it's fallen off the radar because of everything else. Like, let's bring that back in. So I think it's just really important that if you're trying to build a certain type of company or you want to be a certain way, like come up with, okay, well, we will do a team lunch on this day and we'll do professional development by all watching a talk together, and we'll do like this thing on this day and set actions that relate to the kind of company you want to be.
I think just bouncing off that as well, it's keeping it consistent as well, like you're saying, actually doing it. So I've had some weeks where myself and Dean and some other of the senior staff have all been away, and I've had people say, oh, we won't do retro this week then. But I think it's really important to give people the opportunity to be heard, and if you don't have that consistency, then they get out of the loop really quickly. So I'm very firm, we have to do it. I don't care if there's 2 people there, it's happening,
Yeah, culture is a constant process, right? It's something that has to be maintained, and it can be very easy, I think, and I've seen this happen a lot, is you can set a series of values and sort of say like, well, these are our company values. These are the things that we believe in, and then you kind of let it sit. And it's so important to come back to those and update and revise and evaluate. But this can be very different depending on what type of team you have. So some of you work co-located, some of you work remote, some of you have hybrids. How does that change company culture, and how do we sort of correct for those differences in various ways? So, Emre, you work in a co-located team. So you're primarily all in one office.
2 now.
Yeah.
Oh, 3 now.
Sure. How do you handle that?
I think that, for example, we have Opaque Space, which is, I guess, the company or the studio that I lead, has very stringent expectations on the guiding principle of just don't be an asshole. So we try and expect that from our co-workers as well, in the same shared space. There have been, when there is a problem, we try and see how we can kind of in a soft approach change things around. Like maybe an artist feels uncomfortable at having a specific person keep looking over their shoulder or something like that, and we try and tackle that in a really nice kind of we just talk it out basically. But with external contractors or with external parties, or when we're co-working with a studio that might be overseas, we do have, I guess we have management will step in. Like the producer that we have, Danielle, for example, she has like a blanket check in terms of authority, and I basically told her, when you're engaging with our partners or engaging with any of the affiliates or anything like that, ask for what you want or what you need up to the point where someone becomes a bit of an asshole, like they break that rule, and then escalate it up to me and I'll deal with it as well. But I think that's worked pretty well so far, in that the affiliates that I've been working with know that I'm not going to be in the email chain until something's starting to go a little bit weird. I think as employers, we're not just like the last line, but also like that first line as well, in the sense that the employees can feel like they've got the backing, as opposed to, oh, why didn't you manage that relationship better, and you made that person mad and things like that.
Yeah. So I know that all of you have experience in this area. Jen, what have you found with the differences with particularly hybrid teams?
Yeah, so I once managed a team of about 20 people. Half of them worked out of their home offices, so they worked at their homes around all of the United States, which is a fairly big place. And then the other half worked in the headquarters. And what I found is that it was really easy to develop an us versus them mentality, especially because if somebody is in California, there's a 3-hour time difference. And it was really important to me that we got everyone together physically at least twice a year. Now that's expensive. You're flying in 10 people from around the country, you've got lodging, you've got food, and it's also expensive in terms of time. And in order to get this approved in our annual budget, I asked the team if they would be willing to commit to the revenue that would offset the expense. And everyone was, first of all, really excited to be asked, because often your boss doesn't say, will you commit to this higher target? They give you the higher target. But they also felt like this is something that would have a tangible impact on the work that they did and the team that they did it with. And so everyone, not just the people who were traveling in, was really happy to make this commitment. And getting everybody together in the same space every 6 months was one of the most powerful team building activities we could do. We also did something really unusual with our holiday party. So It really sucks if you work remote when there's any kind of party, because generally you don't get flown out. And so we declared a virtual holiday party. Everyone on the team was required to work from home that day. They had to submit an ugly sweater for a contest. They had to submit their favorite holiday themed movie. And then we also did a Secret Santa gift exchange where we actually gave everybody $10 and randomly assigned people, and they bought other people gifts and had it shipped. And so at the virtual holiday party, people unboxed their gift. They opened their present. Because everyone was in the same situation in terms of being virtual, it was actually a really great way to say, hey, everyone is important in how we celebrate things. Everyone is important in these social elements. And we got really phenomenal feedback on how we handled that.
That's really awesome. So Calliope, you've been listening to all of this as someone on the other side of the fence again. Does that alleviate some of the worries? Because I know that there are a lot of expectations when people think about the games industry. I remember when I started, I was really worried that, I'm gay, and I was really worried that there'd be, bias against me or something like that. And some of my fears were validated, not that particular one, thankfully, but, some of them were met. So for you as somebody coming into the industry, having listened to this panel of incredible experts, what do you think as an expert on the other side?
So firstly, I just want to check, do you mean specifically about remote working, or do you mean about everything?
In general.
In general. Like I said before, this is also wonderful to hear. I think that, I'm going to say my generation, but people in my position get a fair bit of scaremongering around what's expected in the industry. Also, particularly as an artist, there's this fear of you can always be better, and there's always going to be someone better than you, right? So, I guess it's the same for all disciplines. I'm just speaking from my point of view. So the I feel like the idea that kind of goes around with a lot of my classmates in particular is that if your whole life isn't practicing, then you're not going to get a job. And it's so nice to hear that actually just don't be an asshole and you'll be fine. And I think that is actually something that I would like to see a lot of my peers working more on, is their soft skills rather than their hard skills, because I know a lot of really, really talented people whose hard skills are spectacular, who would not be able to verbalize who they are as a person or what they want in a scary interview situation. So please keep, be really nice to especially, I really liked what you were saying before as well about, making sure that everyone feels heard and that everyone's listened to. I used to work in a really kind of old school hierarchy in my PR consultancy, and the one thing that I thought that they did really well as far as building a team went was that every Monday morning we had a team brainstorm session about how we were going to approach different clients, and everyone was equally listened to. The managing director let us all voice our views first, and then came in with her opinion, rather than sort of preempting what we should all be thinking by saying her opinion first. So that was sort of my one tip that I thought of before when you were asking about creating empathy and trust and how to deal with that.
It's just such an important thing, right?
Yeah, it's so important. And for me personally, I would rather work for a company that I knew cared about me than a really important company that everyone else was talking about.
One important aspect of caring about people is obviously focusing on mental health, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit. How can we better support our employees and co-workers from a mental health perspective? We are an industry where a lot of people come in from the fringes. We're a passion industry. We have a lot of people from different walks of life. Some people with, who struggle with mental illness, disability, etc., who come to our industry because they're passionate about what we do. How can we better support each other?
Treat it like a flu for starters. If someone calls up and says, I can't come to work because I'm having a mental health day, remove the stigma around it and say, good, stay home. Entire week, don't worry about it. We've had employees that have been increasingly comfortable with voicing that, to the point where we make sure that if we do hear about it, that we'll email them and say, good work. We'll divert emails, to us instead. We'll take the load. Just go do your thing. Get better. Feel well. And it's interesting watching the transformation of staff who are more comfortable talking about the issues that they face in their personal life and how it impacts their work life, as opposed to trying to balance all the different spinning plates at the same time. Because you can't source control mental health. Like, you can fix a broken commit, but you can't fix an employee once they're past the point where they have permanent damage or they can't function anymore. And then then they have the fear of, I can't do my job, so I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to lose my rent, and it's going to be like a big snowball. And trying to remove all those mechanisms along the way, I think is pretty important.
Yeah, I think first of all, it's about setting up an environment with sort of set expectations. So, we work, we actually don't track anyone's hours, so I assume everyone works 40 hours a week. I don't really care what time people come in, what time people leave. We have sort of in our induction information, which is, one page of sort of guiding notes, we say, sometime between this time and that time, but we don't monitor people, we trust them. We expect people to work around 40 hours. If I notice, and again, it's about noticing, if I notice that people are doing more than that, I talk to them and I say, hey, I don't want you in the office, what are you doing? I try to make it clear to my staff that if you are under-resourced, if you feel like you're having to do more than 40 hours, I want to know about it, because that's my problem and that's my fault. It's not on you. It's on me, because either I haven't given you enough resource for the project, I haven't given you enough upskilling for the project, I haven't given you enough support for the project. That is my fault. And I think that's a really big thing about being a manager, is actually that when if anyone in your team is failing, and I don't see any of that as failing, it's actually on me. So I think setting up the expectations of the kind of workplace that you want to have is really important. And again, it's those actions, like we say that at Runaway, we want a good work-life balance, and then we follow through on that by setting the hours and noticing if people are doing more and adjusting. I did have a second point. What's the question again?
It's around mental health.
Mental health, yes. And then I think the other side of it as well, so you set up what you expect, and then again, you just sort of notice people and react to that. So, and put people first. So if it's a sunny day and we've had 2 weeks of rain, I'm like, hey guys, go to the beach. Just seriously, please, can everyone in the office get out, go for a walk in the park. If you've got a big pressing deadline, then just make it a short walk. That's cool, but please get out. And people are some of the newer staff are kind of oh, can we do that? I'm like, hell yeah, you can do that. Go get some sunshine, recharge yourself. And, if you notice that somebody is seeming a bit burnt out, go up to them and be like, hey, I want you to take a couple of days off. Let's make that happen. If you don't feel like you can do that in your workload, let me move things so that you can. And I think just paying attention to people and making it clear that, we make the rules, and so make them in a way that look after your people.
I think it's also really important as a leader to recognize that you bring emotions to the workplace, and to show your emotions, and particularly your vulnerability. It is hard for someone to believe that you value them as a human if you don't also share your humanity. And that means saying really difficult things. It might mean saying, I'm sorry, I'm going to be really distracted today because my partner is having some medical tests and I'm worried about that. When you give your team the gift of sharing that, you are saying, I trust you. I am bringing my whole self to work. I am feeling comfortable enough to be vulnerable to you, and you can do the same thing to me.
Yep, absolutely.
I really agree, the flexible hours thing as well, and treating the when our latest employee came on board, she asked me, what time do you all start? I kind of just said, try and get around 10, if that's all right. Then she asked, can I come here early? I'm like, yeah, don't see why not. I mean, everyone else rocks up at 10 o'clock. And what we've realized is, and this is really weird, we only, prior to having flexible hours, people being late or not coming to work and then randomly during the day saying, I'm sick, I'm not coming in. or even the general volume of sick days were actually much, much higher than it is now, in the sense that if someone's 5 minutes late on a 10 o'clock, it's all right start, they still message us and say, oh, I'm running late. Like, no one really is kind of pressuring that, but trusting employees with self-management in a flexible workplace means that you're dealing with professionals. You're not dealing with people that you have to micromanage, and you can step back and give them an environment where they can kind of shape everything themselves. I think that helps promote not just mental health, but professional empathy as well.
Yeah.
I think that's really important, and I think like we have unlimited sick leave, unlimited annual leave, which sounds amazing on the surface, but you have to really make sure that people actually take it. You don't want them to feel like they need to be at the office at all hours or anything. Everybody goes through things in their lives. They have a rough time. They might, breaking up with their girlfriend or boyfriend, and there's always going to be something going on. So when people are having those times, we don't want them to be at work. They're not going to even be feeling like they're doing a good job. If they've got something going on, they should go and they should do that and deal with that and come back when they feel like they can actually give it, their all, and they can enjoy it, because you spend so much of your life working. It's really important that you're enjoying what you're doing. It's a huge proportion of your life, and being in quite a creative industry as well, I think it's really important that you feel comfortable doing what you're doing and you're not worrying about other things going on, especially when people have got children or anything going on at home. Their child's sick, they should be at home with their child. They can work at other times. It's not life or death. It's video games.
It's just games.
I'd just like to add to that quickly. As a student, there's kind of not a lot of options around taking time off for mental health. It's sort of like, well, if you take the time off, then you're missing these classes, and you may really, really need to be at those classes in order to pass the next assignment. So kind of going through that really strict schedule makes it a big priority to me to make sure that an employee would be comfortable approaching me and asking me if I was okay. So it goes obviously, it's one thing to say, come to us. But it's another thing to say, I would like to be committed enough to notice and want to go to the employee. It would really make a big difference to me if someone noticed when I wasn't feeling great, because it's really scary, particularly as a junior, to put up your hand and be like, I'm not well. My anxiety is flaring up today. I need to be at home. Particularly if you just started at the company, that's a really scary thing to do. And if you're in a really anxious space anyway, you don't want to be that person who says, I can't do my job today because of something that no one else can see. So what my peers and I would really appreciate is people having, as employers and managing directors, etc., being okay with approaching us about that stuff, because I don't think you're going to insult anyone if you say, hey, are you all right? I've noticed a couple of things. Do you want to talk about it? So, yeah, thank you.
I think also I try and, you want to check in with people, but I don't want to pry too much. So if someone messages me and says, hey, I'm sick, I'm not coming in today, that's absolutely fine. They do not have to tell me, all the details of what's going on if they don't feel comfortable. You're not well for whatever reason. There's no reason that is not okay.
Yeah, I think as well, preempting stuff is really important. So I'm not going to say we never do overtime. Things break and people have to come in at the weekend or get online in the evenings. It happens. We try to not do planned overtime. But when something like that happens, we had an awful time a couple of weeks ago where we had 2 weekends in a row where something broke, and one team in particular was online trying to fix it. And so, I talked to that team, was like, hey, take some time off this week. I need you to get out of the office this week. So you try to preempt it so that they're not doing this extra time, and then burning out and then having an issue. So I think you can preempt things as well.
So we're going to have a real quick break, a 3-4 minute break in a second. But if any of you are doing consistent planned overtime, I would encourage you to come and talk to our panelists afterwards. Come and talk to us. Have a chat with us. We might be able to give you some advice. So let's have a real quick break. just for a couple of minutes. We'll come back at 10 past. Have a think about some questions you might like to ask, some problems that you're having in your workplace, different things you'd like solutions to, and we'll answer them to the best of our ability. All right. We're going to get back to it. So, I am going to get all of you to ask us some questions. And then at the end, I'm going to ask our incredible panelists for a single takeaway. Maybe have a backup one, or maybe two, because I suspect some of them are going to be the same.
You all know I'm going to say don't be assholes.
Nobody say don't be assholes. We all know that one now. Right, yeah.
When you say you want to hire people within the culture of the studio that you've got, how do you make sure you're getting that with clients? Or like, just, how many people do you want to do that?
Like, look at all those white people.
Yeah, exactly. It's very easy to just hire.
And that swings both ways, doesn't it? Because you can also get people with, I'm going to say shitty culture because I'm on the opposite side of that fence, but you can also have the same justifications used for people to, have culture that fits their stereotypes, and where they hire people that look like them, talk like them, act like them, have the same gender as them, the same political beliefs, and slippery slope, that one. So I think the important thing is get the team involved in it too, because that's the reason why we have each applicant who goes to interview stage meet the team. And then the team also has a bit of an input and they kind of get a bit of a feel for that person, or the person has a feel for the team. But it's very difficult. It is. Like, that's why it's a month-long process, right? And we value diversity of opinions, especially professionally. We need analytical minds, extroverts, introverts, people who are more empathic, people who are less empathic. So I think involving the team, obviously not democratically, but by committee to a point, it may help. They may pick up on things that you'll kind of got blinkers on as well.
I think you have to be really careful when using culture fit as a reason to move forward or not move forward with a hire. And Liam actually mentioned something earlier that we haven't discussed yet, which is values, right? Mm-hmm. So if you say, I don't want to hire Jen because she's not a culture fit, my immediate response is, then you need to tell me what values you feel she is not consistent with. Because otherwise, culture fit becomes a blanket excuse for hiring someone who isn't white enough, or who isn't male enough, or who doesn't have the same love of games that you have, or doesn't have the same sports team love. I mean, it covers so many sins that if you want to hire for culture fit, and I think that is important, you need to explicitly define what culture fit really means. And having those values that everyone has agreed on and bought into is a really good step in doing that.
Yeah, and on that note as well, I think values has always been something that I've hated previously. Like in other companies, I've always been like, values are so wanky. Like, I don't want to talk about company values. But it's something that I actually really like about Runaway. Like, we have 5, so it's like not too many. They're very specific, and we come back to them, we revisit them. And one of the things I'm actually most proud of in terms of how we use our values is that our staff actually argue based on, like, they reference their arguments back to a value. So, like, I am so happy when I hear our, like, customer support staff arguing with our developers over something, and they're like, but players come first. It's a value. Like, we have to do this. And I'm like, yes, we live them, and I think that's really important. Also, just directly to answer your question, I think, like, one, I totally agree with what you've said. You have to have, like, it has to tie back to something. Also, something that we do is that we have different people lead the interviews for different positions. So it's not just like, I don't interview everyone. Like, our tech people interview, some people, and our artists interview other people, and then they get to meet a variety of people. So there's more than one person just like driving it. I also think it's really important that if you identify that you are looking for more diversity in your studio, or you want to, like, consciously reach out for a different type of person, that you actually make sure that you explicitly, like, ask for that. And this is something I said in another panel yesterday. We really want more female developers, or a female developer, because we don't have any. And we've never had an application from a woman to be a developer at Runaway, and I hated that. And Lisa and I were talking about it when our most recent ad went out, and I was just like, how do we get women to apply? And I was like, well, let's just say we're a really diverse studio. Like we value that. We are pretty much at like gender parity within the studio. We would really like to have women apply for this role. Like, please send us your CVs. And we basically said that and got 4 applications within the week from never having any. So I think like acknowledge what it is that you're looking for. Don't expect people to read your mind and put it out there.
Jen?
Okay. So this is about competitiveness because, you know, in our industry, it's a very competitive industry. If you want to get hired, it's very terrifying, as you said before. And when I was still a teacher, right, we used to do, at the end of big projects where people would have to work in teams, do a survey where we asked people to rate how much more they think they personally were competitive teammates. It was hilarious because about 75% of everyone rated their own work that they put in more as everyone else, and obviously those numbers don't add up at all. So people are really competitive with each other and lack empathy for the work that other people do. Do you have any good tips for increasing the empathy between team members and how we can make other people understand the work that we do and not only the hours we put in? Does that make sense?
I think we do encourage competitiveness at the studio, but on the same note, like you say, it's really important that everybody sees each other as a human as well. We all want to excel, and it's quite a common human thing to feel like you're a little bit above average on any given scale on things, and you want to have that drive and that, but you need to make sure that everybody's coexisting aside from the competitiveness. And I think keeping in touch with each other, having those meetings and one-on-ones and doing fun, non-competitive things is really important as well. We do, not everybody at the studio even plays video games, but we do often, stop work and we go play a game together, and, we argue, we compete, but we have a laugh as well. And I think that's the important thing, to balance out that.
I think for us, we don't really, I don't think we really encourage competitiveness and comparison. Like, I think that if anything, I kind of discourage it. Like, I have had some staff who have got fairly competitive, like a couple of people in very similar roles. And I actually sat down with them and was like, guys, this isn't a competition. I value both of you. I really respect both of your work. I don't want you to compare yourself to each other. I just want you to enjoy your job and focus on what you're doing. And like, I kind of try to be quite proactive on that. So I think that's like one thing you can do, is actually just call it out and talk to them about it and be like, why are you guys competing? Like, why are you, if it's something you don't want to encourage, talk to them about it. I also think for us, we work in quite small product teams. So I think that probably helps, because everyone is working quite closely together, and the product team will have a meeting every week where they talk about where things are at and if things are on track or not, and how to get things back on track. Everyone kind of talks quite closely and works quite closely together. So I guess if you're working in a big team, maybe seeing if you can, I mean, it would be a lot harder. Maybe some people that work in larger teams, because we work in about a core team of about 5 people for most of our projects. So maybe people with bigger teams can.
Like I see 2 sort of types of competition. There's the competition where you're working alongside someone who's really brilliant and you want to also be really brilliant. It's like, if you go snowboarding and you go snowboarding with someone who's better than you, you improve a lot quicker. I think that kind of competition is good, but the kind of competition where you're pushing someone's head under the water in order to be better, that's the bad kind of competition. Yeah.
I once ran a company that had one studio of about 100 people and another studio of 200 to 300, depending on the time. And I got to create the bonus plan from scratch and got a lot of pushback from the owner of the company, who wanted people bonused based solely on their contribution, which creates inherently a lot of competitiveness. And then you have one studio saying, why the hell should I help the other studio? Because I don't get anything out of it, right? And instead, I created a bonus plan that was focused on the revenues of the entire company. So what I did was say, okay, what is our shared goal? Our shared goal is for all of our products to be successful. Our shared goal is for the company to be successful. How do we reward that specific behavior? And a lot of it is rewarding behaviors, not outcomes, right? So by creating those mechanisms within the company to focus on what's shared as opposed to what's competitive, and reward the shared outcome in the right behavior, that was a really important tool in encouraging the right kind of competitiveness, and also saying, hey, if you're going to be a jerk and not help your colleagues, at the end of the day, you're hurting yourself.
Also, I think the thing that fosters that competitiveness is being really relatable, right? So if you have two completely different people working on completely different parts of the game, you're not going to have any competition there. So with people who are getting competitive or getting, envious of each other in that sense, I think that the best way to tackle that is to basically point out the values that each one of them has, instead of focusing on the fact that they're both trying to do the same thing, if that makes sense.
Other questions?
So a lot of questions earlier were about kind of pastoral nature of the workplace, which is really important to me. I'm assuming that all of these game companies have a creative side to it. And I'm curious what kind of those daily micro behaviors that you reinforce to kind of foster the creative side of that instead of, for instance, the financial side.
Ownership of work. So along with flexibility comes responsibility, but there's also the ownership of, literally the work brief of the artist or a lead artist, for example, Stefan, is make the game look good. How you do that, that's on you, really. But the idea that his responsibility as an artist is to try and push the boundaries or trying to find a creative approach or even, he cracked a massive technical problem in Unreal Engine 4 for displaying a massive curved video texture, for example, because he wanted to put the aurora into the game. So he wanted a player to be over the earth looking down, and the player would see a very realistic depiction of the aurora. I don't know how that he did that, but he took ownership of, I want to have a visual spectacle in the game. He worked with the game designer, the technical people, and just said, this is what I want to do. And then he just did that. That was a creative endeavor. I think that was really, really great. And the same thing would go for design, for engineering, and hopefully even for production management. And that ownership of the work or what we're finding in terms of our self-reporting is that it's allowing people to explore creatively how to achieve their work. But I know that there's some, brainstorming stuff, but in terms of behavioral changes, and this can be much more kind of micro changes, is that ownership allows people, I think, to change their approach to work tasks and things like that as well. But you may have different opinions, yeah.
Sorry, I'm making notes so I don't forget this. I'm not working, I'm just making notes. Okay, I'll go. So, for us, I think just some of the day-to-day things that we do to try to kind of foster creativity is I really, like I was saying before, I really encourage people to get out of the office if you need to, go somewhere, go sit in the park. One of our people quite often will go sit in the park and meditate for half an hour. And I think having the freedom in a workplace to be able to do those things and being actively encouraged by essentially your boss to not just sit at your desk is hugely important. So that's something that I really believe in. Likewise, the flexible hours thing in terms of just saying to people, and I had this conversation with a person in a creative role start of this week, where she was saying, I'm finding it quite hard to be creative right now. I was like, okay, take 2 days off, just immediately get out of here, go hang out at home. And she's like, oh, but we've got I'm like, I don't care about the deadline. I'll work out the deadline. You take the time off. So I think having the ability to do that. Getting inspired, I think, is really important. So we, every week, have a GDC talk that we watch together as a company, and we really value professional development. And so I will encourage people to watch talks during work time, do research during work time. That is your work. If you are looking into something new, and you need to spend 3 days doing research, you get paid for that. You're not expected to do that at home. And that's something that new people coming into the company are often quite surprised by because they're not used to that. We also have a game design club, so we pick a game and we'll all play it, and then we'll all talk about it together, and we get ideas from it, and we try to do active stuff like that, which I think can foster creativity. Also, in terms of like, I guess, a more strategic creativity, some of the best conversations that I personally have had in terms of the future of the company and what we're doing has come from getting out of the office, being outside of our day-to-day and talking about things. So I think just like that physical getting away from your desk is like probably the most important thing. And lastly, I think when we're looking at some creative decisions, we quite often try to involve the entire team and get people to bounce and make it really clear that we want everyone's opinions. One thing I've learned from that is that it's really important to tell people how the final decision will be made prior to doing that, because otherwise they can feel like it's meant to be this democratic process and then you're like, oh, but actually the final decision is going to be made here, and they feel ripped off. So I think if you're going to involve everyone, make sure it's clear how the decision gets made in the end.
Right, one more question real quick. Jen?
Nice.
I have a question about, like, with trying to create more diverse workplaces and stuff like that. How do you deal with the fallout of potentially bringing someone onto the team who is a woman, for example, and then having that amped up so it's almost like they feel like they were only brought on because they're a woman, not because of them as a person or what they can bring to the team?
Can I ask a question? So, in general, when you hire for a role, you get a number of applicants who can do the job, right? So if we say you hire for a role and you get 5 applicants who can do the job and one of them is a woman, why is it a bad thing to say that out of the 5 equally qualified applicants, we hired a woman?
But then equally going around the studio and being introduced and saying, oh, it's so nice to have you on.
But I think at the end of the day, so one of the things that I'm really passionate about is the myth that there is the single qualified applicant, right? Because that, unless you are, unless you are looking for an extraordinarily specialized skill set, like, you know, the neurosurgeon who has separated 10 conjoined twins through their heart, like, there are a large number of people who possess both the skills as well as the values to succeed in a certain role. So one of the things that I think is actually a mark of both honesty and diversity and inclusivity is saying, okay, out of the qualified applicants that we get, we want to hire someone who is not like everybody else in the company, because we value that diversity of opinion. We value that diversity of experience. We value that diversity, whether it's in gender or color or ethnicity or experience or age. There's so many ways to build a diverse and inclusive workplace. And I think if we are not honest that we are making decisions because we value diversity and inclusivity, we are doing our teams a disservice. And I'm really sorry, this is just something that I'm so passionate about, because we cannot have more diversity and inclusivity unless we say explicitly, fuck yeah, this is important.
Sorry. Does someone else want to say something?
I want to ask something about that really quickly.
We've got very little.
About that.
Okay, very quickly.
Really quickly, like if somebody, because I know somebody who like found out they got hired because they're a woman, and they're like, I don't want to be hired because I'm a woman kind of thing. How do you, when you hire someone like that, how do you approach them in a way that they understand why you came from that point?
I think people don't want to be hired because they're a woman, because the secondary implication of that, thank you, asshole dude bro from Google, is you can't do the job as well as a man.
Yeah.
I think if you say, look, we are going to have these 5 or 10 equally qualified applicants in our candidate pool, all of them can do the job. All of them fit our values. When we make the final decision, we want to hire explicitly to improve the diversity and inclusivity of our team, and we are proud of that. That is a very, very different message. The key thing that has to come in that communication is that all of those, final pool of candidates are qualified. All can do the job and do it really well, and all fit with our values. And then once you've checked those boxes, if you're talking about checking boxes, hire somebody who brings something new to the team, because that helps your team grow and it makes your team better and your product better and your company better.
And can I just jump in really quickly and say for us, for us, our focus is really on getting more women to apply for jobs. Like that's really what it's about for us, and that I want to see more applications from women for our roles. And then, like you say, like then you get into like you have candidates who are equally qualified, and then you make those decisions. But for me, it's really just about getting those applications in, because I think that far too often women undervalue themselves and don't apply for roles that they are more qualified for than other people who do apply for them.
All right. Single sentence, rapid fire takeaways from Emre to Steph.
Okay. Let your employees do what they love in the workplace. I think that's the only takeaway that I have. You know, if you've hired an engineer who loves doing something, let them explore. Some of the most successful companies that we know in terms of their market value are companies that allow employees to make their own job descriptions and explore those options and explore flexibility where you can.
Mine's even quicker. If you encourage crunch, I will hunt you down.
For me, if you work in a place where you feel like you can't be not only intellectually but emotionally honest and vulnerable, you are not working in the right place. And you also have an obligation in terms of building the culture. Every single person at the company has this obligation to practice that intellectual and emotional honesty, because otherwise you're not building anything that's sustainable.
I'm going to use quite a strong word here and say, don't just care about the people that you work with, but like love them, like really love them, look after them, care about them, give them your time, love them.
I think for me, it's about remembering that everybody is a human and we're all humans, and human resources sounds really lame and boring, but it's very true. And without the human and the humanity aspect, then we can't actually continue making games or doing anything awesome.
Thank you all so much for coming and being on this panel. Thank you, Steph, for jumping on at the last minute. That was very useful. Thank you.